really bizarre seeing this sudden turn on Glinda the Good Witch when just last year y'all were reading me to filth for calling her out for being a white feminist. Spoilers if you aren't up to date with Wicked. Universal just released some deleted scenes from Wicked for Good, and it got me thinking about Glinda as a character and our perception of her from the first film to the second. When I first called Glinda a white feminist, people swore up and down that I was just judging her and I needed to wait to act two. But as someone who grew up in New York City, I was well versed in the Wicked lore. I'm one of the lucky people who got to see the original actors on Broadway. And so I found it very odd watching all these people come to Glinda's defense when she has always been portrayed as someone who's methodical, smart, and kind of puts off this air of ditziness as a defense mechanism. The song Popular is entirely about Glinda putting Elphaba on game, letting her know that people's perception of you will dictate exactly how far you will go in life, and foreshadowing that Elphaba will never be able to win over the people the way that Glinda does. In the stage play, it is made very clear that Glinda is a politician. Her relationship with Madame Morrible reads more like co-workers who don't quite like each other but hate their boss even more. And when you hear her sing Couldn't Be Happier, you can feel that regret of a woman who feels like she may have chosen the wrong path. And so when I watch Ariana Grande's interpretation of Glinda in the first film, which was so much more methodical than in the stage play, I thought the natural order of the second film would be showing her using her whiteness and her privilege to get ahead, knowing what it is doing to the animals and her dear friend. But as I watched the film, I actually started to side with my haters and think, you know what, maybe Glinda isn't as active as I thought she was. When I saw previews of her being included in Wonderful, which I always thought was a mirror to Popular, where the wizard is telling Elphaba how good life could be if she just aligned herself with him, I thought seeing Glinda in that number using her relationship with Elphaba to change her mind would highlight how insidious in nature some of the moves that Glinda makes. However, the girl in the bubble and some of the scenes prior to it kind of suggests that Glinda is not an active player in this. She's almost a prisoner in a gilded cage of her own design, I will say that, but things seem to be happening to her in Wicked for Good. And the thing that cemented it for me was seeing that they removed her tour of Emerald City and this politician outfit and opted to put her in that princess gown when she's saying Couldn't Be Happier, when the pink and green gown so closely mirrored the outfit she was wearing in the stage play. And I think what the director was trying to show us was that this Glinda is very different from the one that we see in the stage play. She does love Elphaba in her weird way. Not only are things just happening to Glinda, but she's given a level of deniability because she's been shielded from the ugliness of the wizard. After Glinda performs Wonderful with the wizard, she leaves, and then the wizard shows the atrocities that he's been performing to the animals to Elphaba only. So Glinda's allowed to have this blind eye and live the beautiful life of the Emerald City while Morrible and the wizard do the dirty work. In the stage play, I've always had this feeling that Glinda knew what was going on, but genuinely felt like this was the only way for her to move forward. And I think it's interesting that a lot of people interpret Glinda's actions as her trying to do things from the inside, when it's clear that Glinda is not doing anything to help. In fact, she sits idly by as Morrible spreads propaganda. Fiyero is actually the character that tries to change the system from within. I really wish that the extra screen time in Wicked for Good would have given us some time with that character, because he kind of serves as a plot device for both Glinda and Elphaba, when really he could have been the mirror to Glinda and her actions. When they are on the podium speaking to the people of Oz and Morrible announces their engagement, Fiyero is shutting down every type of lie that Morrible tries to say, to the point where they need to take him off stage because he's not having it. And although he becomes the head of the police force or whatever, he makes it very clear that he is just trying to find Elphaba. And how they interpret that move is on them. And the way that Fiyero is radicalized to the point where he is holding Glinda to gunpoint is what I think y'all think Glinda is. But I'm here to tell you that is not true either. Maybe she's not as nefarious as I thought she was when I watched Act 1, or as nefarious as she is in the stage play. I keep on saying stage play, I mean musical. I'm sorry, guys. But Glinda never actually needs to make hard choices. And I always felt like she was more hurt about the embarrassment of losing Fiyero than she was in losing Fiyero or Elphaba. Because let's be clear, her continuing the lie that Elphaba was wicked was not a service to Elphaba. And this is where the changes that Wicked for Good made in the ending kind of muddles what kind of character Glinda is overall. While I do think it's very realistic that someone like Glinda would swoop in the last minute and benefit off of all of the work that Elphaba did to free the animals, getting the magic, getting that happy ending. I do think it's interesting that they kind of made it seem like she didn't revel in No One Mourns the Wicked. I have this debate all the time where people are like, well, Elphaba asked her to keep the lie up. Yes, Elphaba said, you know, you don't have to refute what they say. She didn't say burn an effigy in my likeness. And it's not like Glinda just stood back and watched the Munchkins burn this effigy. She herself was the one who threw the flame on it. And I was like, you didn't have to go that far. And I always felt like in that moment that Glinda was letting out some of her frustrations. Because at the end of the day, Glinda definitely felt like if her and Elphaba stuck together, they would have had that power in everything else. Glinda's main goal, which we even see in that added flashback that they put in the film, it's something that fueled her more than anything else. And even though that gave her a hollowness, it's something she could never abandon. She could never be roughing it in the woods like Elphaba was for years. And she acknowledges that. She's like, what's wrong with wanting all of this? The issue is Glinda never had a moment to understand what her politics really was. Morrible and Elphaba both tell her what is right. And in this film, they make decisions for her. Once she goes to Emerald City, Glinda stops doing things for herself. And it's interesting to me that a woman who understood the game, politics so well, got taken advantage of by the system. And honestly, I think that's realistic. I think that that's something that happens to white women all the time. They have good intentions and they are trying to work with people that they know that aren't necessarily on the right path and then get objectified and commodified in a way that they didn't intend. Love it or hate it, Wicked was a spectacle that I think brought in a whole new audience to musicals, and I have to applaud it for that. I definitely think that the two films could have been put together and maybe be 3 hours, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I definitely think that contributes to why people didn't like For Good as much as they could have, because it's just too removed from the first act. That being said, I enjoyed it, and I enjoy Glinda's character and what she represents. I have no issue with the second act being about her and the first act being about Elphaba, because I feel like that's what the musical is like too. But tell me, what are your thoughts on Glinda and her politics? Let me know in my comments below.